In the heart of the Middle East, at the crossroads of continents, faiths, and civilizations, lies a land that has carried the weight of history upon its shoulders. A land whose soil has absorbed the footsteps of prophets, kings, warriors, and ordinary men and women yearning for peace. This land is Palestine, a place that, for centuries, has been more than geography. It has been memory, faith, identity, and a battleground for truth. And yet, its full story, the untold story, remains hidden beneath layers of politics, propaganda, and silence. The story of Palestine begins long before modern headlines. Thousands of years ago, this land was the home of ancient Canaanites, whose culture and traditions laid the foundation for civilizations to come. Across time, Palestine became a passage and home to Jews, Christians, and Muslims. Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron, Gaza, and countless villages became sacred sites, places where Scripture met the earth. This is the land where Abraham prayed, where Jesus was born, where Muhammad ascended. Palestine is not merely territory, it is holy ground. But with holiness often came conquest. Empires rose and fell over Palestine. Egyptians, Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Ottomans, and the British. Each empire left its mark, yet through centuries of rule, the people of Palestine, farmers, shepherds, scholars, and traders, remained tied to the land, passing down their language, their customs, their olive groves, and their prayers. For them, Palestine was not an idea. It was home. The modern tragedy of Palestine begins in the 20th century. When the Ottoman Empire fell after World War I, Britain took control of Palestine under a mandate from the League of Nations. At first, the promise was that Britain would prepare Palestine for independence. But behind the promise lay another plan, the Balfour Declaration of 1917. A letter from the British government. It promised to support the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, without consulting the Palestinians who lived there for centuries. This was the beginning of a storm. As Jewish migration increased, especially after the horrors of the Holocaust, tensions between Palestinians and new settlers grew. The Palestinians, Muslim and Christian alike, did not reject coexistence with Jews. In fact, Jewish communities had lived among them for centuries. What they rejected was colonization, the transformation of their homeland into another's project. For them, it was not just about land. It was about survival, dignity, and freedom. In 1948, the storm became a catastrophe. The world calls it the Arab-Israeli War. Palestinians call it the Nakba, the catastrophe. More than 700,000 Palestinians were forced from their homes, their villages destroyed, their keys carried as symbols of return. Families fled to neighboring countries, becoming refugees in Lebanon, Jordan, and Syria. Others remained, but under occupation. The world saw the birth of a new state, Israel. But it also witnessed the erasure of Palestine from maps, though never from memory. The decades that followed were filled with wars, uprisings, negotiations, and shattered hopes. In 1967, after the Six-Day War, Israel occupied the West Bank, Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem, territories that international law still recognizes as Palestinian. With occupation came checkpoints, settlements, and a life of restrictions. For Palestinians, even the basic act of movement became a struggle. Olive farmers could not reach their trees. Students could not cross checkpoints to attend school. Families were separated by walls and fences. And yet, through it all, the cry for freedom never died. The untold story of Palestine is not only one of suffering, it is one of resilience. In the refugee camps of Lebanon, children paint their homeland on classroom walls. In the streets of Gaza, poets write verses about dignity and survival. In Jerusalem, merchants open their shops every morning in defiance of fear. For every demolished home, another generation rebuilds. For every silenced voice, another rises. Palestine's story is one of a people who refuse to disappear. The first Intifada in 1987 was a popular uprising. Ordinary men, women, and children stood against occupation with stones in their hands and courage in their hearts. The second Intifada in the early 2000s revealed the anger of a generation that grew up under checkpoints, settlements, and military rule. The world often misunderstood these uprisings, reducing them to headlines of violence. But beneath them lay a simple truth, a people demanding freedom, dignity, and justice. The story of Palestine is also the story of betrayal. For decades, international powers have promised peace, but delivered only negotiations without end. Agreements were signed, handshakes broadcast, but the occupation deepened and settlements expanded. The world spoke of a two-state solution, yet every year the possibility shrank as more Palestinian land was taken. For Palestinians, peace was always on the table, but justice was never served. Today, Gaza remains under siege, described by many as the world's largest open-air prison. Its 2 million people live with limited electricity, scarce water, and constant threats of bombardment. The West Bank continues to face settlement expansion and military raids. In Jerusalem, families fear eviction from homes their ancestors built generations ago. And yet, in the face of despair, Palestinians continue to live, to create, to resist. The untold story of Palestine is also a reminder to the world. It reminds us that justice cannot be selective, that human rights are not a privilege given by the powerful, but a birthright of every child, whether born in New York, Paris, or Gaza City. It reminds us that memory cannot be erased, that even when villages are destroyed, their names live on in the songs of refugees. It reminds us that freedom cannot be delayed forever. For every empire that tried to crush Palestine has faded, while the spirit of its people remains. But beyond politics and borders, the story of Palestine is deeply human. It is the story of a grandmother in a refugee camp who still keeps the key to the home she lost in 1948. It is the story of a boy in Gaza who flies a kite against the backdrop of warplanes. It is the story of a Christian priest in Bethlehem ringing church bells beside the call to prayer from a nearby mosque, a harmony of faiths that once defined this land. It is the story of olive trees that are older than empires, still rooted, still standing, just like the people. Palestine is not a question of religion alone. It is not a question of politics alone. It is a question of humanity. Can a people be denied their rights, their land, their dignity, and still be told to remain silent? The answer, written in the streets of Ramallah, the refugee camps of Lebanon, and the alleys of Jerusalem, is clear. No. And so the untold story of Palestine continues. It continues with every family that refuses to leave their home despite threats of demolition. It continues with every child who learns their history despite attempts to erase it. It continues with every voice that dares to speak truth despite censorship. It continues because Palestine is not just in the land. It is in the hearts of millions around the world who stand in solidarity, who chant Free Palestine not as a slogan, but as a demand for justice. As this documentary ends, the story of Palestine does not. It cannot. Because the story of Palestine is the story of human endurance. A story that reminds us that no wall is permanent, no occupation eternal, no injustice everlasting. The people of Palestine are proof that even in the darkest night, hope is not extinguished. It burns in their prayers, in their songs, in their unwavering belief that one day justice will return to their land. Palestine is not weak. Palestine is not forgotten. Palestine is not gone. Palestine lives in its people, in its history, and in its truth. And the world, no matter how long it takes, must listen. Because the untold story of Palestine is the story of us all. The story of humanity's fight for freedom, dignity, and peace.